Hey, Urkhan, thank you so much for joining us.
You got, my friend. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. So we are here to hear about your winning teams, the way you build teams that can win over time, can have a lasting impact in companies, and you're doing amazing job, amazing work. We had many conversations about, many things, MIT Sloan and beyond, but this is really the opportunity to hear about your amazing experiences and the highlights, the key takeaways that many leaders or people who would like to develop the leadership skills would need to know, and we'll hear your advice. So before we start, if you can share a little bit more about yourself, about your journey, about your current role.
Of course, and listen, I'm blushing after that introduction. I don't know how much I know, but I'll share what I can. Well, hi, my name is Urkhan. I'm currently an MIT MBA student with a class of 27. In my day-to-day role, I head up strategic transformation projects for Kenvue, which was formerly known as Johnson & Johnson. We have 115 brands, including Tylenol, Neutrogena, Aveeno, Band-Aid, among many others. In terms of what the head of strategic transformation projects actually means, it mostly means that I work on engagements that will have a macro impact on the overall strategy of the company. So I worked on the strategic review for our board of directors, which eventually led to the sale to Kimberly-Clark. Prior to my role at Kenvue/Johnson & Johnson, I did a lot of strategy work at Deloitte. I also worked within digital product innovation at American Express. I worked as an innovation consultant at Fahrenheit 212, where we launched the Mondelez Snack Futures Accelerator, and then I worked independently for a good 3-year period as a consultant, moving between media and consumer packaged goods space.
Wow, such a rich experience across so many very, very strong, successful companies and also different industries. So that's great. So you can elaborate on some of those experiences during this conversation. So first, we are here to learn about from you about your experiences and stories about winning teams. So it will be great to hear first, what team you would like to focus on and kind of to share some of the insights about.
I think I'll draw a lot of my experience just from this latest engagement of the strategic review. However, I think when I look back on my career and I think about what actually made a winning team, there are a lot of similar themes begin to emerge. So if we keep it, I think, yes, I'll draw a lot from the strategic review experience, but actually I think a lot of the experiences are universal, right? When I look back, it's really, in my mind, 3 things that make a winning team. First, you need to have a clear direction and purpose, and it's not just at an enterprise level, but for every individual that's actually involved in the engagement. You then need to have the right structure and composition, and I'm not just talking about skill sets, but also temperaments. I feel like sometimes there's this common saying like, oh, you need to have a mix of doers, thinkers, people who are going to challenge versus enable. In my mind, there was an old Greek historian, and he said, a society that separates scholars from warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. This is a very dramatic and extreme example, but I feel like for that purpose, you can't really separate thinkers and doers, so you need a composition of people who have good qualities in both, because you can't be a thought leader if you've never actually gotten your hands dirty, so having the right composition. And then you also need to have the right team dynamics and culture. So you need to have psychological safety, you need to have what I like to call a culture of development as opposed to a feedback culture. And what I mean by that is oftentimes, especially professional services firms, you go through this very rigorous interview process. You have to prove that you are smart enough, that you're capable enough, that you're hardworking enough to be there. Then once you get into a particular team, sometimes there's still that culture of, yes, we're going to teach you, but while we're teaching you, you also actively have to prove that you belong here. And as a result, 1, that leads to burnout. 2, people are afraid to actually question or provide feedback when they need to provide feedback to someone who maybe is a little more senior or jump in with a thought. And it creates an environment where folks are more focused on what do I need to do in order to be here, as opposed to what do I need to do in order to continue to grow and become the best in the world. So for me, once I feel like you're part of the team, then from there is just the point of developing you. And the last point, especially for leaders, I feel like you need to lead from the front. You can't ask your team to do something that you yourself are unwilling to do. And more importantly than that, you also need to be someone who's focused on amplifying your own impact. That's something that I've learned from probably the best boss I've ever had. He always said, you're not going to be able to be in every room. So how can you enable others to take your best qualities and to amplify their own best qualities whenever you're not there. And that is a very selfless approach. It's a very people-first approach, and it focuses on ensuring that everyone around you is succeeding, even if it comes at the expense of you being the most visible person or you being the person up front, because fundamentally that's your role as a leader. You have to take the hard blows and you have to enable everyone else around you to win.
Such a great overview of some of the key qualities, and you mentioned the almost the connection with the MIT motto,
right.
Mind and hand.
Mind and hand, yeah.
Right, and other qualities that come into the play, but really, as you can see it also very vividly, in your own line of work and what works, and of course the importance of psychological safety and the focus on talent development, as opposed to just like we are here, we are the doers. That's
absolutely
just focused on what we need to do. You're saying there is something very significant when you do have these essential conditions for people that they know that they're here not only to deliver, to execute, but they're here also to grow their own talent and capacity, and this is in line with the what the company, what growth actually means for the company.
Absolutely, and I feel like it's then becomes a two-way street between maybe more junior members of the team and the executives, because as an executive, sure, you have a good pulse on the business, you understand the financials, but I've also noticed in a lot of cases there is a little bit of a delta between, all right, we've done X, well, we've launched several initiatives across the company. Why aren't they producing results? Or we've launched a strategy, we've launched an operating model, why hasn't it given us the outcomes that we had hoped for? You're not necessarily going to know an answer as an executive or as a very senior leader. The people on the ground who actually see the reality will have a much better perspective, because as you know, the higher up you go in the chain of command, the harder it becomes to actually see the reality and the truth, because it doesn't often make its way up there. So if there's that safety component of your more junior and hardworking team members can give you a realistic view of what's happening and what's broken on the ground, that gives you a better perspective on your business. You, in turn, as a senior leader, can then give them the opportunity to develop some of those more executive and macro strategic skills that they'll need later on in their career. So it becomes a symbiosis where everybody benefits.
So this almost top-down, bottom-up approach that needs to be done in a very thoughtful, systematic way in order to really have a good sense and kind of eliminate the impact of these potential filters that you have in the middle, that as a senior leader, many times that's what can happen, and this is where you really need to be aware how you avoid that
absolutely
filtered information coming in and the decisions you need to make as a senior leader. I'm curious to hear about your experiences associated with certain human skills, how human skills come into the play, and skills like communication and of course collaboration or creativity, as you can see as you see in your current role and of course in your rich experience across different industries.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe I am in the minority here, but I would almost say human skills, especially nowadays, are infinitely more important than anything you can bring technically. Obviously, to be at a level where you're a senior leader or an executive, you have the technical skill set. But what actually will separate you and make a lasting impact on the people you're leading and the people who are going to want to follow you, it's just the human element. Thinking back, the best bosses I've had were the ones where I knew they were not only committed to the future of whatever enterprise we were working on or the outcome of something, whether not just from a financial standpoint, but from a human standpoint. I knew they cared about the company, the people that worked there, but also they really cared about my future and my development. And that in itself is very motivating for an individual. And I've also observed just through this strategic review work that the best executives are the ones who, one, they listen. Two, that aspect of psychological safety exists where you can come to them with certain information that may be counterintuitive to their own analysis, and they're willing to take on your specific arguments. They're willing to make changes. But also, they create an environment where you realize that it's not really a boss-employee relationship or a leader-follower relationship. It's that environment where we're all going to work on something that's a collective target that will have an impact on a mass number of people, and we are essentially partners and co-workers. And I think that's the human element of it is something people really often overlook. The best bosses I've had, the most memorable ones, yes, they were brilliant, but they were also really great people first and foremost. The people who I also remember for other reasons, I don't remember them because they weren't experts. I remember them because their human skills and let's say the way they've treated others left a lot to be desired of. So I think that fundamental kindness and willingness to listen is incredibly important if you're going to lead people. More so the desire to collaborate, obviously. I think great collaborations, you're able to amplify what the person is good at. Take it as they are, take it as they're willing to present it, incorporate it into a much larger vision, while also maintaining specific swim lanes where people understand that it's not just a collaborative effort where we're all going to come together, where every idea is valid across every spectrum, but that ideas are valid because you can bring some cross-category expertise, or you can deliver a right answer specifically within your domain, and you will have the responsibility and the trust that you're the expert, we're fully relying on you, and we're going to go with what it is that you're saying. That level of responsibility in itself sometimes just pushes people to go perform above and beyond, because they know they're part of a bigger whole, and their inputs are not just there to be like, oh, we're collaborating. They're there because they're an integral piece of a greater whole. I would say bringing those three things together, the psychological safety, kindness, and commitment to people, as well as desire to collaborate, is something that I've found few and far between with teams, but it makes really great teams exceptional. What makes people more memorable to work with.
To what extent those skills come into the play during the hiring processes, right? So we have new talents that the company is looking to bring in, and like you're saying, people skills, human skills are basically the differentiator. Yes, you need to have those analytical skills or certain technical skills to be able to actually do the job, but what actually makes a difference, like you're saying, is really those skills. To what extent this is being emphasized in the hiring processes or in like talent development process in the company?
Yigal, that's such a great question. I'm afraid I'm about to give you an answer that I was hoping that I could give you a better answer for something like this. Unfortunately, I think it's very person by person, team by team, person by person, company by company dependent. It's a universal truth, right? People hire people who are very much like them, right? Steve Jobs had that quote, A players hire A players, B players hire C players, etc. Again, I don't know how valid that is, but that's his way of articulating it. I found that in order to, and I'll rely on a phrase from my home country. There's a phrase that goes, "It takes a jeweler to recognize a diamond." Mm-hmm. So in order to hire someone who has those exceptional skills, you need someone who also has just a very human person, sorry for the crude analogy, sitting on the other end who's able to assess that this is actually a good person and a good teammate. Oftentimes, that's not something that I think companies unfortunately prioritize, and then it falls onto the individual. And then because it falls onto the individual, it becomes a matter of, did you happen to interview with someone who values those skills? Yes, no. If no, then they'll prioritize something else. If yes, then great, you're in a wonderful environment, the team is going to grow. But oftentimes, there's that famous concept that people don't leave positions, they leave bad bosses, and that ends up being the situation. I mean, how many times in our professional career have you interviewed people who you can tell that they left a situation that they weren't ideally happy with? Sure, they're making a narrative around it was the right time, that it's time for me to move on, but you can tell that it's really the environment all of a sudden changed at work. So I think in order for us to especially continue to thrive as a society and just as a corporate environment in the current environment where maybe technical skill sets are going to become a lot more sharper, where artificial intelligence can augment a lot of our analytic capabilities, that focus on the person and the individual is going to have to come to the forefront. And unfortunately, even though a lot of, I feel like, people teams and human resources teams, they talk about it, on a systematic basis, it still falls upon the individual to be able to see whether that person will be the right fit and has the right human capabilities to be, I can't believe I'm saying human capabilities, but that has the right human qualities to actually join and be a successful member of whatever enterprise they're in.
And it's interesting what you're saying here is that with AI, agentic AI and all the capabilities, we see a lot of that more for technical know-how can be, can multiply the effects. So productivity is going up, but what really makes a difference is the human element. That is where the subjectivity or the ability even to evaluate that can be very, very challenging.
Absolutely, and there's this thought that I had for a while. It's we hear a lot of lofty company slogans, and we say, oh, yeah, people follow ideals. I always like to think that people follow other people who embody those ideals, right? So those human qualities are incredibly important from a leadership standpoint. But like you just mentioned, in an AI-filled environment, almost becoming like an anthropologist within your own organization is going to be incredibly valuable. So you can see how you can potentially leverage those technologies to solve problems that are not only going to have a good ROI for the business, but can also augment the workforce and work with the individuals to make the entire enterprise better.
Sounds great. I'm curious to hear about the intersection about your work and, of course, very major transformations that you've led and you're leading now, and the learnings here in the Executive MBA and MIT. What are the three key learnings that you feel have and will have a lasting impact on your work as a leader?
I mean, that's a wonderful question. I knew one day somebody was going to ask me, what are the three things you learned in school? I did not know that today was going to be that day. So if I had to give you it's hard to pick just three, right? Everything we're learning is so applicable. It's very relevant to the day-to-day environment. I think I'm going to give two macro ones and one that's very specific. So from a macro level, I think when we talk about organizational processes and the importance of culture, I think a very famous strategist once said that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. And driving large transformations, you kind of see that that's the reality, right? You may have a strategic positioning that makes sense within the marketplace. You may then adjust the internal company structure to match that positioning. You may then make choices, that will prioritize certain aspects of the business. But if that goes against the way that the company culture is operated for a very long period of time, as well as the political structure within that company, the enterprise will always fight back, right? The system will fight back inevitably. It may not be outright, it may not be done overnight, it may not be done in meetings, but new ways of working are not going to settle in. So I think one of the key lessons that I loved and that I think I'll take on, I have already taken on and will continue to take on in my career is you need to utilize the existing culture of the company in order to drive your overall strategy, because that will make it easier. Even if it's just about the messaging, but you're not going to be company culture. You need to find a way to use it if you wanted to enable your strategic thinking and the structure that you're currently trying to take into place. Similarly, on a macro theme, I think a second lesson would be with political structures as well, right? You have to create coalitions. You have to bring people along. People may not necessarily disagree with your analysis, but they may disagree because it narrows down their potential area of control within a specific enterprise. It may be fantastic for the overall business. It may also be fantastic for their careers, but change is scary. And you really need to going back to our human conversation, you need to be able to communicate directly with those individuals and be able to bring them along on the journey from the very beginning. And I would say on a very practical level, something that I found really interesting is, I know it's more of we're now merging economics and what we've learned in our strategy course, but this ability to say, all right, we know what the common reactions are going to be to what we're doing, right? We know how, again, thinking about the thinking of others, we know how other people are going to react. How can we preempt that in the way that we are potentially rolling things out? How can we already come prepared to address the most common concerns that individuals are going to have? And can we critically look at what we're doing in order to say, is this actually the right move? If we're seeing such a major pushback, does that give us more reason to reevaluate what we're doing and make our arguments stronger? Or perhaps is there something that we've missed? I think so far those are incredibly valuable from a managerial perspective. From more of a technical standpoint, again, I know I'm adding a fourth now, sorry. When we spoke about specifically implementation of artificial intelligence, a lot of technical progress has been made in the field. Certainly a lot of, I would say, ambiguity around some of the ROI around the initiatives that most major companies are currently pushing forward. But one thing that I took away from so far from Sloan is really understanding the key problem that you're trying to solve, as well as how does it interact with the human element, and really approaching it from a human-first standpoint, as opposed to, all right, we have a new technology, how can we potentially use it to solve a specific problem that could deliver positive ROI? It's actually putting the human in the center before we even think about the technology. And the current workflow, I think, was something that's fairly eye-opening for me, because, again, I don't have a technical background.
Wow, such a fascinating integration between the organizational processes and economics, and we are still on the journey. There are so many additional lessons to learn and so many things to dive deeper into. But this was really, really great combination. For folks, watching this interview and looking to build their leadership skills, kind of, looking to, to build their own journey to really become principled, innovative leaders. What will be your advice for someone who's looking to build those skills?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice, but if I had to think about two things that I think every great leader needs to do, I mean, one of them we've mentioned in the very beginning, right? You need to lead from the front. People need to know that whatever it is that you're asking them to do is something that you would do yourself. They need to know that you have skin in the game. They need to know that you're there to make the hard decisions, that you're there to tackle very hard choices, and that you're going to be there every single step of the way leading the charge. You cannot be a leader if you're sitting in the background. You need to be able to get your hands dirty. Your team needs to see your commitment. Something that really always stuck with me, I've seen when we were working on transformation efforts that would impact 20,000 plus individuals, things that always stuck with me was seeing senior executives working with me over the weekend, perhaps even overnight, live, making documents and updates that will go to the board of the directors because, again, they understood the importance of what is happening, not just from their career standpoint, but also because of the impact that it was going to have on so many individuals. So I would say leading from the front, some people say it's a style. I would like to think that it's kind of a requirement if you're going to be the leader. Otherwise, you're not really in a leadership position. You need to lead from the front. Now, this means from the position of tackling the workload. This does not mean that you need to be up there taking credit, but your team needs to know that you're in the trenches with them. The second point that I would like to say is people need to know that if they come talk to you, if they come to you with a problem, you are going to make their life easier. Nobody should be leaving a conversation with you feeling like dejected, feeling like they have no path forward, or feeling like things just became a lot more complicated. If that's the situation, then you're not being a great leader. Your job is to simplify things. I've had two great bosses in my life. One of them told me that if we're ever having a meeting about something that we need to send to the board, and all of a sudden you come out feeling like you have a lot more work to do, then I failed at my job. I need to simplify things and make them a lot more digestible. That is my role. That is why I'm here. I had a second boss who famously once said, when I first took over the company, I really thought I was doing a horrible job. And I was like, why? He's like, and I've never had a good conversation with someone in the last 30 days. I sat there, and every conversation that I'm having is a difficult conversation, and I'm sitting there thinking, I am really not doing well. I have a lot more negative conversations than positive ones. And then and then I started thinking about it from a standpoint of, right, because people come to me when there's a problem that they themselves can't solve. I am the last point of control here. They've tried everything, it failed, they're coming to me to solve it. It's not that everything's going wrong, it's just there's that pre-selection happening. I'm having more conversations that are about challenges because that's why I'm here. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to fix.
It needs to come from the top.
Right, I'm here to fix problems that you can't fix. If you can fix it yourself, you're not going to be coming to me. So being a person who can continue to be a beacon of positivity and who continue to simplify things and give people hope and inspiration, even if it's a difficult conversation, even if it's a feedback conversation where someone underperformed or something went wrong, people need to leave your presence feeling inspired and like change would be possible. Positive change would be within their remit. If that's not the case, then I think you need to reevaluate your leadership style. But that's just my personal preference.
So many great insights from experience and, of course, intertwined with learnings from MIT Sloan. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed yet and you would like to share?
Well, I think also I'm not really sure how this fits in the potential of having a high-performance team because it's not necessarily something you need to do in the moment. But I would say as a leader and as someone who wants to continue to improve their performance, whether you're on a high-performing team, whether you're creating a high-performing team or leading it, continuously investing in developing people is incredibly important, right? When we've talked about the very top of the funnel here, right, the pyramid in terms of what you need to have, we talked about having an organizational vision, right? People need to know that what they're working on is important. That sense of purpose is incredibly valuable. However, you also need to tie it to their personal self-interest, right? A lot of people are going to feel motivated and they're going to feel responsible if what they're working on actually is going to have a monumental impact, whether that's on the market, whether that's actually making the world a better place, or whether because it impacts the lives of their coworkers and the company overall. But tying it to their personal growth, their personal development, potentially personal compensation if that's possible, but if not, then some aspect of where they want to go in their career, that could be incredibly important. And I feel like that's oftentimes an overlooked aspect of leadership. Yes, you're a leader of a large team, but that large team consists of individuals. And those individuals, especially when they are high performers, they can make their impact could go well beyond any metric that you can see. They have impact on their coworkers, they have impact on the overall enterprise, they inspire others, they lift others up, they develop other talents. So to continuously invest in their development is something that's going to pay dividends well further into the future.
Talent development needs to be priority for principled and innovative leaders.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this interview, all the great insights. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My own.